Hello, my name is Simon Ambridge and I'm a solutions engineer with DataStax, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Azure CLI to deploy a DataStax cluster. So first off, I'm not going to assume that you've got the Azure CLI tools installed yet. So if you do a Google search for Azure CLI install, this first result will be this really helpful article from Microsoft on how to install it. So this goes through their different installers. There's also a Docker container that has it pre-installed as well. But I usually find it's nice to have it running locally. So once it's installed locally, you can go over to your command line and log into the CLI. And if everything is working all right, you should be able to run the command Azure group list. And that goes out to Azure and it connects and it sees what resource groups you have running, and it lists all those off. And you can see that here that that's worked. So I have a working Azure CLI now. The next thing I need to do is I need to make a copy of the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager templates for deploying DataStax. So if I switch back to a web browser, these are the ARM templates. They're up on GitHub, they're publicly available, they're under the DataStax partner network. So if I click this copy to clipboard link right here, I can then copy the entire repo. So in my home directory, I'm going to type the command git clone and then paste that URL that we copied. So I should probably call that out, that I'm assuming you have the git command line tools installed here. So hit enter and it goes out and it downloads some things. And now if I do an ls locally and have a look, I have a new directory, Azure Resource Manager DSE. So I'm going to change directory into that directory, do an ls again. There are a couple of things in here. There's the marketplace offer. This is the sort of the create UI wrapper that we use in our Azure Marketplace offer. It's not really very interesting or useful outside Marketplace, but it's really more left there so that you can inspect it and understand the things that we're doing in Marketplace. And it's just a wrapper around the things that we have in this directory. Specifically, the Marketplace offer is a wrapper around the single DC folder that we can see here. But since you're looking at the command line, my assumption is that you want to do something more interesting than just a single data center. So let's change directory into multi-DC and do an ls in there, and you can see a couple of things here. One is a deploy script, so I can cat the deploy script, and this is our main entry point. It creates a resource group, and that's a container for all our different artifacts. It then runs a Python program that generates an ARM template, and then finally it runs this command. Here you see the Azure group deployment create, and it creates a deployment using the template that we generated just now, and that's been saved into this directory. So there's also a note here that it uses clusterparams.json. So let's take a look at clusterparams.json really quickly. What's in here? It's interesting. It's got a list of locations. It can be any number of locations. And then for each location, the number of nodes to create and the VMs to use. So in this case, we're using a D1 V2. And finally, there's a username and password. These are going to be the username and passwords for all our machines once they're all built and running. So if I want to deploy this 10DC cluster, all I have is to do is /deploy and then the name of the resource group. I'm going to call it Ben1 and hit enter. It goes away, it creates the resource group, and now it's creating the deployment. And this, once it's creating this deployment, it's going to run asynchronously. So even if my network connection to Azure fails, the deployment will almost certainly still complete in the background. So at this point, let's flip back to our web browser and look at one other thing. Before we do that, let's see, it's 5:49 p.m. So let's remember that time, because that will tell us how long this whole thing took. So I'm going to pop over to resources.azure.com, log into my work account, single sign-on, and I'm now in resources.azure.com. So if I drill down, I can see Ben 1 already. So it's already made a bunch of stuff for Ben 1. Some virtual machines, availability set, 3 availability sets, of course, 1 for each location. So there's a lot of VMs, 10 of them in each location. Only 1 new node to run Op Center. That's the administrative tool and so on. So at this point, I'm going to pause our recording and I'll resume it once the deployment's completed. All right, so we're back. It's 6:21 p.m. now. So it took roughly 30 minutes to run the deployment, and it's output this URL here. So if we go to this URL, we'll be able to see our newly deployed DataStax cluster. So I'll copy that, go over to a web browser, paste that in, hit enter, and we see loading Op Center. Okay, so it's giving this little error saying that some agents have failed to connect when Op Center was started. This is a quirk we see when Op Center started the first time. You can do either of 2 things really. You can just ignore this and carry on, or you can just restart Op Center and the problem will go away. So for now, I'm just going to dismiss it and ignore the warning. And you can see here the cluster health. It says East US, Central US, and West US. There are 10 nodes in each. So I'm still kind of amazed at how superb this is. It took about 30 minutes and we deployed 30 machines across the US in a geographically distributed database cluster. So if we click over here, we can see a view of the cluster. I'm going to zoom out a little. We can see the different nodes in it. We've got 10 in East, 10 in Central, and 10 in West. So so let's really quick go restart Op Center and just see if that fixes the problem. So I'm going to copy that URL there and hit clear, SSH to the DataStax account on that node. Just going to get rid of the HTTP at the beginning. All right. So yes, I do want to connect. Enter my password that I specified earlier, and my I believe it'll be sudo service opcenterd restart. Restart. There it goes. Restarting Cassandra Cluster Manager opcenterd. So let's go back to the web browser, see if that helped. Hit refresh. Fantastic. Now it's talking to the agents correctly. Okay, so one thing that's interesting here now, we can see that a couple of these nodes have gone yellow, which means that they're under load. So as I mentioned previously, we started with these D1 single core nodes, so even a small amount of load, in this case probably just Op Center writing to the database, that's going to cause them to show under load. So that's where we are, a multi-data center cluster, all set and deployed with a single command from the Azure CLI. I'll set up a couple of other videos to show how to debug failed deployments, as well as some recommended next steps once you've got a new cluster. And I'll look forward to seeing you then.